I had been married to Daniel Carter for 3 years when it happened. A single slip on the stairs, a flash of pain as my head hit the marble, and then everything changed. When I woke up in the hospital, it wasn't just the pounding in my skull or the dull ache in my bones that made me feel like I was falling apart. It was the flood of memories that didn't belong to this life, or at least not to the part I had lived so far. Somewhere between reality and fiction, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't who I thought I was. I was the villain, the selfish, manipulative side character in a twisted love story, a woman doomed from the start. Daniel, my husband, was never mine. Not really. In this story, he wasn't even the main character. He was the loyal second lead, the kind-hearted man who quietly protected the real heroine from the shadows. And I, Emily Brooks, had married him in a union of families, not hearts. His younger brother, Jason Carter, was the reckless ex-boyfriend of the female lead. His older brother, Nathan Carter, was the powerful CEO, the cold but perfect male lead in every romantic cliché. And me, I was the bitter, jealous wife who chased after every man in the story, who plotted and clawed and ruined everything that stood in her way. I tormented the heroine. I made her life hell. And in the end, I died miserably. They said I died clutching half a scallion pancake pulled from a trash bin, like it was the last treasure of a broken woman. In the middle of a brutal snowstorm, my body was found stiff and cold fingers frozen around that pathetic piece of food. Emily Brooks died forgotten. When the news reached Chicago, no one mourned. People whispered behind closed doors that she deserved it. Some laughed, some cursed. And then they moved on, erasing her from memory like she never mattered. A few weeks later, no one even remembered her name. I jolted awake from that memory, my heart pounding, as if I had just relived my own death. A wave of dizziness hit me, forcing me to lie back down. I had been in bed for 5 days. The doctors said it was a mild concussion and that I needed rest. 5 days ago, I was preparing for the 3rd anniversary of my marriage to Daniel. It was supposed to be a celebration not just of our union, but of a merger between the Carter family and the Brooks family. 2 powerful legacies tying their futures together. The event wasn't scheduled on anyone's birthday or a national holiday, so the date was chosen purely for corporate and family symbolism. Our opinions didn't matter. Luckily, both Daniel and I had long outgrown the age of rebellion. For family, for image, for survival, we played our parts to perfection. Pretending to be the perfect couple in front of high society had become second nature. On that day, like every other grand event I held, Daniel's arm smiled gently and walked gracefully by his side. We descended the staircase together, the very image of elegance and unity. But just as we reached the middle landing, Daniel's phone rang. It was a key business call. He whispered that he would join me shortly and gestured for me to go ahead. I wasn't a child. I waved him off with a reassuring smile and told him to take his time. Still, he reminded me to be careful in my heels. I gave him a playful look and muttered, "I'm not an idiot, you know." But maybe I was in that moment, because the next thing I knew, I was tumbling down the stairs in front of hundreds of guests, crashing hard against each step before everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a sterile hospital room, surrounded by white walls and antiseptic smells. Daniel stood nearby, speaking quietly to the doctor. The physician explained I had a mild concussion. I might feel dizzy, nauseous, or even disoriented for a while. There was also a chance of temporary memory loss. He ran a few tests, asked me a few basic questions. I answered everything correctly, no gaps, no forgotten names or events. Everything seemed normal on the surface, but I knew something was deeply, terribly wrong. I hadn't forgotten the past. I had remembered the future. For 5 days, strange images haunted me, flashes of scenes, moments and emotions that didn't fit into the life I knew. They came like puzzle pieces scattered across a storm. Each day they grew clearer, more persistent. I saw myself screaming at a woman with soft eyes and quiet strength. I saw Daniel looking at someone else with a tenderness he never gave me. I saw my own hands shaking, reaching into a trash can for something to eat, tears freezing on my cheeks as the snow buried me. And this morning, the final piece slid into place. The fragments fused into a single horrifying truth. Those weren't dreams. They were memories. Memories of a life not yet lived, or maybe lived and looped. A story written long ago with me cast as the villain. In that story, Daniel was the quiet guardian, never mine. Jason, his younger brother, was the ex-boyfriend of Grace Taylor, the real female lead. They had once loved each other fiercely, only to break apart in a tangle of lies and regrets. And Nathan, the eldest, was the male lead in every sense. Cold, brilliant, untouchable. The perfect storm in a suit. And Grace. I had never met her in this life, not yet, but I knew her name. I knew her face. I knew everything about her. She was the girl from nowhere, the underdog who won. She had no pedigree, no stunning beauty, nothing on paper that made her special. But she was kind, resilient, hard-working. She had just graduated college and was picking up the pieces after yet another bitter breakup with Jason. In a few months, she would walk into the Carter Corporation for a job interview. That would be the beginning, the start of everything, the rise of the heroine, the fall of the villain. And I was standing at the edge of that story again. This time, I remembered the ending. The strange part was from the very first moment I met her, I couldn't stand the sight of Grace Taylor. There was something about her, the way she stood quietly in the background, unremarkable, and yet noticed. The moment the men around me began paying attention to her, something inside me snapped. Jealousy festered like poison, clouding every rational thought. I couldn't stop myself. I picked at her, mocked her, tried to humiliate her, all while hiding behind a polished smile. I was a married woman after all, but not to someone I loved. 3 years into my marriage to Daniel Carter, I found myself slowly, inexplicably drawn to his older brother Nathan. It was absurd. Nathan was the epitome of loyalty and control, a man who wore fidelity like armor, and never once offered me kindness beyond social niceties. He kept his distance, and rightly so. Still, the more he refused me, the deeper the resentment grew, and before I knew it, I was spiraling. In a fit of foolishness and spite, I even flirted with Jason, Daniel's younger brother and Grace's ex. The memory alone made me want to slap myself. What kind of melodramatic soap opera had I stepped into? This was the sort of trashy drama that played at 8 p.m. on weeknights, the kind people watched just to mock. It was illogical, over the top, completely out of character for someone like me. I wasn't some love-starved teenager. I was a realist. I worshipped money. Love to me was a luxury, not a necessity. In this world of polished smiles and sharpened knives, there weren't many couples who genuinely loved each other. Most of them were like Daniel and me, smiling for the cameras, silent behind closed doors. Business alliances in the shape of marriage. Who had time to chase fairy tales? I was 20 when I met Daniel. My family had arranged a series of meetings. We saw each other 3 times before the elders from both sides decided we were suitable. Before the wedding, we hadn't exchanged more than 100 words. Love that wasn't even on the table. The Carter brothers were all handsome in their own ways. Even from a distance, they turned heads. But neither Nathan nor Jason were my type. Nathan was too stiff, emotionally locked away, barely smiled. Jason was impulsive, temperamental, a storm with no warning. Compared to them, Daniel was the best option by far. He was gentle, patient, endlessly composed. We could sit down and talk through any issue, no matter how sensitive. He never raised his voice, never judged me for my quirks or lifestyle choices. We had chemistry too, at least enough to make the nights pleasant. But Daniel didn't love me, that much was clear. He married me for leverage, not passion. If it hadn't been me, he would have married another heiress, treated her just as politely, just as kindly. Love was not something Daniel Carter chased. His life revolved around quarterly earnings and board meetings. Romance had no place in his priorities. And truthfully, I didn't love him either. Not really. How could I claim to have feelings for a man who barely registered on my emotional radar if I couldn't even fall for Daniel, gentle, handsome, respectful Daniel? What in God's name would make me fall for Nathan, the coldest of the 3? It was ridiculous. Whatever part of my brain had imagined such a twisted storyline needed serious medical attention. Maybe the head trauma was worse than the doctors thought. Half laughing at myself, I grabbed my phone and opened a message to Daniel. "Babe, I'm craving fries. Can you grab a large order on your way home?" It was childish maybe, but I had been sick for days, and junk food was my comfort. Daniel was always busy, always working, and I didn't expect an immediate reply. But maybe because I was still a patient, he responded quicker than usual. "Ask the doctor," he wrote back 3 minutes later. "He says bland foods only. Avoid fried or spicy stuff for now. Just hang in there. If tomorrow's checkup is clear, I'll bring you whatever you want." I smiled. That was Daniel, practical, thoughtful, always following the rules. I texted back, I feel fine today. Let's do the checkup early. I'm ready. A few seconds passed, then his reply came. Appointment is for tomorrow. I'm slammed. Today can't go with you. If you really want to go early, take someone with you. Of course. Business came first. It always did. But to his credit, he didn't leave it there. I'll have Lily go with you. I'll call Dr. Trin and see if we can move the appointment. Lily was the daughter of the Carter family's longtime housekeeper. She had grown up in the guest quarters of the estate and returned after college when she couldn't find the right job. These days she worked as a household assistant, mostly helping around the property when needed. Daniel and I weren't fond of strangers in our home, so we usually hired cleaners by the hour, rather than live-in staff. But after my accident, Daniel had asked the main house to send Lily over to care for me, just until I recovered. She was efficient and respectful. More importantly, she understood the rhythm of our world. After 2 decades growing up in the Carter household, she spoke our language, unspoken boundaries, subtle cues, quiet loyalty. Whenever I got bored lying in bed, I'd call her in just to chat. It wasn't companionship I was after so much as distraction. I didn't want to be alone with my thoughts. Not when those thoughts whispered about a storyline I couldn't escape. Not when they reminded me of a future where I became everything I despised. Daniel had set his conditions, and I had little choice but to agree to let Lily accompany me to the hospital. She, of course, didn't hesitate. She moved quickly, arranging the car, checking my coat, ensuring everything was in order. I had barely fastened my seatbelt when she glanced at me from the front seat and said, "Ma'am, I have a friend who just graduated from Lakeview University. She was an outstanding student, did an internship at a major firm, and the managers there loved her. I heard the assistant position for Mr. Nathan Carter is still open, because the previous one went on maternity leave. He only hires through internal referrals. Would you be willing to put in a word for her with Mr. Daniel, just to give her a chance?" She said it so politely, so smoothly, like she had rehearsed it 100 times. "The world runs on connections after all," she added, smiling in the rearview mirror. "It's common to help each other out this way." I blinked slowly, confused for a moment. "Wait. If the position is for Nathan, why are you asking me to talk to Daniel?" "Oh, right," Lily explained quickly. "Mr. Nathan's been on a business trip down south for the past 2 weeks, so he left the recruiting responsibilities to Mr. Daniel." I shrugged. "All right, that's a small ask. I'm not stingy when it comes to helping people. Just send me her resume. If I don't have something in writing, Daniel won't pay attention." Lily beamed. "Thank you, ma'am. I'll send it to you after we get back from the hospital. I'm not promising anything," I warned gently. "That's okay," she said brightly. "Just a chance is enough. Whether she gets in will be up to her." I rested my head against the window, watching the streets roll by in silence for a while before I finally asked, "What's your friend's name?" "Grace Taylor," she replied, her voice light and full of pride. "Grace, like, simple and elegant." I didn't respond at first. I just hummed and turned my gaze back to the window. But a few seconds later, a chill ran through my chest. "What did you say her name was?" I asked again, my tone sharper. "Grace Taylor," Lily repeated. "Grace like quiet beauty, and Taylor like the flower, lotus." The air inside the car suddenly felt heavy. I sat in stunned silence for the rest of the ride. Even after the checkup, I forgot entirely about my craving for fries. All I could think about was that name, Grace Taylor. The name I had seen over and over again in those strange memories. The name of the girl I was destined to hate, the one who would unravel everything. Back home, I told Lily to send me Grace's resume. She was quick. Less than 5 minutes later, a full-color PDF popped up in my WeChat. The photo in the upper right corner caught my eye first. It was a half-body shot, professional clean. Grace had straight black hair and soft features. Not a bombshell by any means, but far from plain. A classic oval face, delicate bone structure. At first glance, she might not catch your attention, but when she smiled, God, that smile. She had the kind of dimples that lit up her entire face, small and shy, like secret windows into something warm and genuine. She had that quiet kind of beauty, the kind that made people feel safe. And I remembered Jason had always been drawn to girls like that. While others chased glamour and fire, he craved simplicity. He had been madly in love with Grace for years. And despite his hot temper and explosive nature, every time they fought, He would always be the first to apologize, always the first to come crawling back. I stared at her photo for a long time, hesitating. Should I send it to Daniel? Should I open that door? But then I reminded myself I had made a promise. And more than that, I was no longer that woman in the story, who acted out of jealousy and spite. I had no intention of standing in Grace's way. If Daniel truly did fall for her like the memories suggested, then fine. Let them have their story. If this marriage between Daniel and me had run its course, so be it. I'd take my settlement, pack up my pride, and disappear into some corner of the world where no one knew my name. I had no interest in playing the third wheel in a love triangle, especially not in the unwanted discarded position. That wasn't who I wanted to be anymore. Daniel came home late that night, past 9. He'd had a full day at the office. Lily had already asked the cook to prepare a light dinner for him. Then she came to my room, gently knocking on the door. "Mr. Carter is home," she said softly. "Would you like to join him downstairs?" I wrapped a thin cardigan around my shoulders and waved her off. "You go ahead. I'll come down in a minute." Lily grinned brightly and disappeared. She seemed unusually cheerful. Clearly, her bond with Grace wasn't just casual. That girl mattered to her. When I finally walked down the stairs, Daniel was already seated at the table eating. As always, he had his tablet propped up, scrolling through financial news, while chewing methodically. That was his routine, never wasted a moment. Nathan, by contrast, had taken efficiency to a whole new level. He had moved a bed into his office and only came home once a month for family dinners. The man had all but vanished from domestic life. Nathan would turn 30 this year. 30 and still single. Still untouched if the rumors were true. In the whirlwind web that would eventually form between Grace and the Carter brothers, I had a feeling the mess was only just beginning. A man like Nathan, wealthy, powerful, and still pure, was a rarity, practically mythical. Daniel once told me, almost like a joke, that Nathan had never been in love, never even kissed a girl. If that were true, he was on his way to becoming a monk. Shaking off the thought, I crossed the room and sat beside Daniel. He glanced at me, putting his tablet down. "What did the doctor say?" he asked, his voice calm and even. "That's good," Daniel said, with a soft breath of relief. For the first time in days, the tight line of exhaustion around his eyes loosened, and he even managed a faint smile. "Just maybe ease up on the heels next time." "Okay." It was the first time in 5 days he'd brought up what happened at the party. I could tell he was trying to lighten the mood. Maybe even give me an opening to talk about it, so I chose to meet him halfway. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "I ruined such an important night." He shook his head. "It doesn't matter. Your health is what matters most." Then he paused for a beat. "Did Grandpa say anything?" "Not much," I answered. "Just asked about my condition," which meant whatever pressure was coming from the Carter family side, Daniel had absorbed all of it. What was strange was that no one from the Brooks family had reached out either. Other than a brief call from my mother on the day I woke up, there had been nothing, no anger, no blame, just silence. But that was the nature of families like ours. Cold, transactional, performative. The Brooks family, if anything, was worse than most. Every dollar spent on me had been calculated like an investment, and they didn't believe in losing money. The moment I hit the legal marriage age, they dragged me to back-to-back blind dates. They didn't want to settle for families below their status, so they kept searching until Daniel Carter finally became available. He was a prize. At our wedding, both families publicly announced a major business partnership. It was a joint venture that would be led by Daniel himself as a reward for marrying me, for giving up his personal happiness to secure strategic gains for the family. He had agreed willingly. I was certain it wasn't without condition. As the middle child, Daniel had always been in a precarious position. Above him, Nathan was the star, the heir apparent being groomed for power. Below him, Jason was reckless and entitled, a walking cautionary tale. Daniel didn't want to fade into the background like Jason. He was focused, ambitious. He knew that marrying me would open more doors, give him access to resources that otherwise might have bypassed him. Still, the Carter family was surprisingly harmonious. There were no power struggles between the brothers, no backstabbing, no inheritance games. The three of them worked together within the Carter group, each playing a part in preparing to take over the empire from their elders. Jason, who used to be a spoiled brat, had matured significantly over the past year. He had learned from his older brothers, toned down his wild behavior, and even started using formal language in conversations. The transformation was almost impressive. The Brooks family, on the other hand, was a complete disaster. My father had more illegitimate children than I could count. The upper floor of the house wasn't stable, and the lower one was leaking. My older brother, always eager to follow in our father's footsteps, had already fathered 3 kids before he even walked down the aisle. My mother. She wasn't much better. She spent my father's hush money on a rotating carousel of younger men, each one more forgettable than the last. In this world, most upper-class marriages were little more than polite arrangements. Everyone had their own side games. The unspoken rule was simple: don't embarrass the family. Do whatever you want, just don't bring it home. To this day, I hadn't met a single one of my half-siblings. Not that I cared to. I was lost in thought when Daniel asked quietly, "Have you talked to your family?" "No," I said plainly. "You should check in with them. They were worried about you." I let out a breath. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about the PR mess. That's all, because in those strange fragments of memory I had begun to piece together, there was a version of my life where, after Daniel and I divorced, the Brooks family disowned me. They locked their doors, froze my accounts, and cut off everything. My father retracted the dowry he'd given me, pulling back every cent like I was some failed investment. He even closed my bank cards and demanded I apologize to Grace and the Carter brothers. I remembered myself in that version, desperate and alone, carrying what little I had to a remote town, hoping to disappear. But luck wasn't on my side. I got robbed. Everything I owned was taken. That winter I died of starvation in a rented room, completely forgotten. When the Brooks family finally collected my body, they cremated me and scattered my ashes in some desolate suburb, not even bothering with a headstone. If that was what love looked like in my family, I had no interest in keeping ties. I tapped on my phone, pushed the resume file, and handed it to Daniel. "I heard Nathan's short on staff lately," I said casually. "Lily has a friend who just graduated. The major fits. Maybe take a look." Daniel glanced at me, clearly surprised. He knew I rarely involved myself in company matters. "Lily asked you to talk to me." "Not really, she mentioned it in passing. Her friend just wants an interview. The rest is up to you." "She's quite aware of our company dynamics," he mused. "She grew up around the main estate. I'm sure she overheard a thing or two." Daniel smiled slightly, a hint of amusement flickering behind his eyes. Still, he opened the file and began to scroll. Usually, HR handled all resumes, filtering through multiple rounds before anything ever reached him. By the time something landed on Daniel's desk, it was often the final interview stage, meaning the candidates were strong contenders. He skimmed through the document. A line appeared between his brows. "This resume is a little rough," he noted, "but her experience does match what the role requires." "I'm not really concerned about the outcome," I told Daniel. "It's your decision. I only promised Lily I'd pass it along." "Getting an interview is already doing her a favor. That resume wouldn't make it past HR anyway." Daniel nodded slowly, clearly agreeing. "Yeah, HR gets hundreds of applications every day. This one would have been tossed at first glance." "Don't they all look the same?" I asked, trying to play devil's advocate. "No," he replied. "This one's way too casual. It doesn't highlight any of the key strengths. If someone's applying for an assistant position to an executive, they need to know how to organize contracts, schedules, and documents. If their resume looks like they threw it together last minute, how can I trust they'll manage anything properly? And if she screws up, guess who has to clean it up?" He wasn't wrong. As he spoke, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Now that I'd confirmed both Lin Dung's appearance and basic details, I was almost certain that the fragments of memories flooding my mind were real. Somehow they were memories of a future that hadn't happened yet, or maybe one that was bound to. I looked at Daniel. He was gentle, steady, a genuinely good man. If I had a choice, I wouldn't want to end up divorced from him. But then I remembered the image from my vision, him placing a divorce agreement in front of me, cold and detached, and I pushed that naive thought away. Men like Daniel weren't irreplaceable. There were billions of people in the world. 3-legged toads might be hard to find, but 2-legged men were everywhere. And this was a marriage of convenience anyway. There was no love, not really. I already had my own money. If we divorced, I could still live well. Better than well, actually. I could even do what my mother did, spend a bit of money to maintain a few good-looking boyfriends without ever needing to attend another mind-numbing gala. Now that was a dream. Oh, then I'll ask Lily to have her friend revise the resume I offered. Send me your internal email. I'll tell Lily to have her friend include your name as the referral. That'll at least get her through the first round. Daniel nodded. That's fine. I took care of it quickly, passing along the instructions. Lily sent back a flood of thank you emojis and stickers, clearly thrilled. With that done, I felt a wave of exhaustion creep in. I stretched and stood up. I'm heading to bed. Don't stay up too late, okay? Daniel looked at me with a touch of concern. You're sure you're feeling all right? Absolutely, he paused like he wanted to say something more. Then, can we start sleeping in the same bed again? I froze. I had the words on the tip of my tongue, ready to agree. But then just for a moment I saw Lin Deng's smiling face flash in my mind. Something about her soft dimples and innocent charm made me hesitate. I still wake up randomly in the middle of the night, I said quickly. I don't want to disturb your rest, Daniel shrugged. It's okay. I don't sleep much anyway, but still it's better this way. You need rest. You've been working nonstop. He looked amused. You think not sleeping with you is going to help me rest more? That's the opposite of restful. I rolled my eyes. People who want to do great things shouldn't be distracted by beauty. He chuckled, eyes crinkling with genuine amusement. Are you calling yourself a distraction? I raised an eyebrow. Aren't I? He leaned closer, teasing. Is this your way of seducing me? You tell me, I whispered, leaning in to place a kiss on his forehead. Because if it is, it's working. Daniel blinked, stunned for a second before letting out a warm laugh. He set down his chopsticks, pulled me into his arms, and held me tightly. I leaned into him, resting against the steady rhythm of his chest, feeling the soft rumble of his laughter under my cheek. What's so funny? I asked, playfully annoyed. He rested his chin on my shoulder and nuzzled like a lazy puppy. You said I shouldn't fall for beauty, but I already have. Yours? Maybe because I was still recovering, Daniel didn't push any further. He helped me get cleaned up and then returned to his office to finish work. Once I was alone in bed, I found myself wide awake again, scrolling through my phone. A message from one of my so-called friends popped up. She sent me a few blurry photos. I clicked them open and nearly dropped the phone. There he was, Jason Carter, the younger brother, the family's troublemaker, kissing a girl on a public sidewalk, like they were the leads of some cheesy romance drama. My friend messaged again. That's the Cinderella he's been chasing. She's from some rural area, right? Apparently this wasn't news to people around campus. One of her classmates at Hytham University had seen Jason tailing the same girl for months. They'd broken up and gotten back together more times than she could count. Supposedly this time they hadn't spoken in over 3 months. Everyone assumed it was finally over. But no, Jason wasn't letting go. The girl wasn't anything special, objectively speaking. Not rich, not powerful. Just an ordinary girl with a kind smile and a quiet presence. The kind Jason seemed to gravitate toward. My friend asked, do you think your mother-in-law would ever let Jason marry someone like that? Of course she wouldn't. That wasn't even a question. She was just here for the gossip. I replied, I have no idea. Jason and I aren't exactly close. Come on, he calls you second sister-in-law. He acts all respectful. But kissing girls on the street? Really, he's not exactly discreet, I shot back. First time I had dinner with the Carters, he showed up late, hair dyed bright red, wearing a leather jacket, and didn't even say hello. The look he gave me like I'd just robbed him blind by marrying his perfect older brother. These types of people, these spoiled rich brats, they were everywhere in our circles. I never felt close to any of them. I didn't want to. I had always kept my distance. And tonight, I felt that distance more than ever. Who in their right mind would willingly invite chaos into their life? Jason Carter wasn't exactly incapable of being thoughtful. He just didn't care enough to bother. If he ever truly cared about someone, he'd move mountains for them, suffer without complaint. But I was just the villain in the background, the cold-hearted supporting role, the so-called bitter wife. I never expected more from him. Maintaining a facade of civility was the best I could hope for. In those strange fragmented memories that kept surfacing in my head, I remembered a moment of weakness, where I threw coffee at Grace Taylor, the supposed heroine of this twisted story. Jason didn't care about what that would mean for his brother, my husband. And honestly, I doubt Daniel Carter even felt anything for me at that point. Jason immediately fabricated a fake medical report and tried to press charges. He didn't succeed, but what came afterward was even worse. I died not long after that, tragically, quietly, and utterly alone. Sure, I may have been petty, cold, and sometimes sharp-tongued, but I wasn't evil. I didn't physically harm anyone, never crossed legal lines. I was just unkind. And yet in that future, I was reduced to someone who dug through trash for scraps of food before dying in the cold. That felt grossly unfair. And what for? Because I had the audacity to like the wrong man. Because I dared to want what the story had already reserved for the leading lady. This heroine, Grace, didn't just get the man she loved, she got all the men. All three Carter brothers fell for her in their own ways. Even if she never made promises to the other two, they remained devoted, loyal. Jason was predictable. But Daniel, with his famously high standards, his very healthy libido, and his pragmatic coldness, was a different story. Somehow he too remained pure for a woman he couldn't touch. That made no sense, and yet it happened. And now Lyndon Grace Taylor's real name had reappeared in my life, like a shadow from a half-forgotten nightmare. She had been with Jason, that much was clear, but if she could win over someone as emotionally closed off as Nathan Carter, the eldest brother, and tame Jason Carter, the wild child of the family, then winning over Daniel wouldn't be a stretch. And if she did, I'd be the last one standing, unwanted, unloved, discarded. What kind of fairy tale was this, where one girl walks into a rich family and every eligible heir falls at her feet? It wasn't impossible, but it was rare. So rare it bordered on mythical. It was like spotting a unicorn on Wall Street. Still scrolling, I received another ping from Trisha. Update: Jason kissed Cinderella out of sheer jealousy. He thinks Big Bro's trying to steal his girl. What, that woke me right up. Explain, I typed, my fingers moving faster than my thoughts. Haha. I knew you'd be curious, she replied. So apparently someone saw Nathan having dinner with her a few nights ago. Very cozy, very flirty. Jason walked in and flipped out. I frowned. That didn't track, but Nathan's on a business trip, I wrote back. Yeah, this was a few days ago. Photos just surfaced today. If that were true, then Grace and Nathan had already met. But something still didn't make sense. I was slow to process things lately. Blame it on the fall, but this time a realization hit me hard and fast. If Grace had already met Nathan Carter, why would she need Lily to pull strings to get into the company? That was completely illogical. There was only one major L-name corporation in Hytham, and it was Carter Group. If she'd dated Jason, she already knew the family. She knew who Nathan and Daniel were. So why go through Lily? Why come in through the side door when she already had the key to the front, unless she was playing a bigger game? Unless the entire point was to bait me, corner me, and then watch me fall apart piece by piece. Of all the female supporting characters in this kind of story, I seem to have drawn the shortest straw. In my memories, I was the one who died in the most humiliating way. And for what? For getting in the way of the heroine's happy ending. Daniel returned to the room, exhausted but calm. He pulled the covers over us and instinctively wrapped an arm around me. Still awake, he murmured. I leaned into his shoulder, unlocking my phone and pulling up the photos Trisha had sent me. Without a word, I held the screen out to him. He blinked at the image, then took the phone from my hand. His brows furrowed slowly. Is that Jason? Yup. With Grace? Mm-hmm. His eyes narrowed. What is this? He's kissing her in public. And not just any kiss, I added. The kind that says, "You're mine, stay away from my brother." He set the phone down, clearly annoyed. Is this recent? Trisha said it was a few days ago. Photos just came out. Daniel exhaled through his nose, rubbing his forehead. God, this family. I said nothing. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, the realization digging deeper into my bones. Grace wasn't just some sweet, naive girl who got caught in the middle of family drama. She knew what she was doing. She always did. You don't date one Carter brother, break up with him, then sneak into the company run by his two older brothers by accident. You do it because you have a plan. And suddenly, I wasn't sure who the real villain of this story was anymore. Do you recognize this girl? I asked, holding out the phone. Daniel stared at the photo for a few seconds, then nodded. Yeah, that's the one from the resume. That's what I thought. Trisha said your brother used to date her. If that's true, then... He raised an eyebrow. Then what? I pointed at the image Jason kissing her deeply in broad daylight. Then how do you explain this? Friends don't make out on the sidewalk like that. He didn't argue. I scrolled through the chat and showed him every message. They say Jason lost it because he caught her having dinner with Nathan, I said. What do you think? Daniel blinked, clearly puzzled. Nathan, yeah. If she already knew both your older and younger brothers, why come to you for a job? He looked at me, his expression unreadable. Maybe she really wanted to get into the Carter group. That's your take? I asked, not quite believing it. He kept staring, then reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. Tomorrow I'm taking you for a full checkup. I blinked. You think I'm losing it? No, he smiled softly. My wife is too smart for that. He kissed my cheek and turned off the light. Let's sleep. We'll think about this tomorrow. And honestly, I was fine with that. This wasn't my problem to solve. Whatever weird game Grace Taylor was playing with the Carter brothers, well, she could play it by herself. I had no interest in wasting more brain cells on her. With that thought, I snuggled into my pillow and let the night take me. Daniel, as usual, reached for me in the dark. He always liked to fall asleep with his arms wrapped around me. It was sweet in theory, but in practice, uncomfortable as hell. I'd complained 100 times, never worked. We were married in name only, but somehow he clung to me like I was his lifelong sweetheart. The next morning was a rare treat. It was the weekend, and Daniel actually stayed home. We slept in late sunlight spilling across the bed by the time we got up. Daniel, ever the man of structure, immediately summoned Lily to the dining room. Lin Dung. She's your friend? He asked. Lily looked startled. Yes, sir. She used to date your younger brother. Daniel's expression didn't change, but when he was that calm, it usually meant trouble. I could see Lily tense up instantly. Yes, they dated for a while, but they've been broken up for months, she added quickly. How long did they date? He asked, peeling a boiled egg for me. Since his 3rd year in college. So, about 3 years. Daniel kept his voice even. And what did she tell you about applying to the company? She said Carter Group was always her dream. She applied online twice, but got rejected. Lily was speaking fast, like she knew she had to get everything out before she was interrupted. Last week, Mr. Nathan was home for dinner. I overheard him mention needing a new assistant. So I asked if I could recommend someone. He told me to ask you since you're in charge of the hiring now. That explained a lot. Lily had acted on her own. I could tell she was being honest. Her nervous hands and the thin sheen of sweat on her forehead gave her away. Daniel set the egg on my plate, his voice calm. She didn't know Jason was working in the company. She did. That's why she avoided applying to his department. Has Nathan ever met her? Lily looked up surprised. I don't know. She never mentioned it. Daniel gave her a sideways glance that made Lily immediately straighten like a soldier under inspection. How do you know her? We went to the same university, Hytham University. She was a year behind me. We were both in the student council. She's efficient. Her family struggled financially, so I helped her out a lot, Lily added softly. Daniel tilted his head. How much money did Jason give her? Lily froze. Her lips pressed together and her eyes flared slightly with indignation. Still, she kept her voice level. She's not that kind of girl. Jason pursued her very aggressively at first. She was focused on school and work, not dating. Daniel gave a small, ironic chuckle. So Jason really didn't know shame. Lily was caught off guard. Her posture shrank. I didn't mean it like that. All right, he said. One last question. He picked up a wet napkin, cleaning his hands with deliberate slowness. How long between meeting and dating? 1 month, Lily said without hesitation. Daniel gave a sharp, dry laugh. Very aggressive pursuit indeed. Lily heard the edge in his voice, but said nothing more. She pressed her lips together and waited frozen like a student in detention. He let her go without another word. She practically fled the room. I'd watched the entire exchange, still trying to wrap my head around it. It felt like there were more questions than answers. Is that it? I asked. No more questions. He turned to me, a hint of amusement on his lips. You want more? You didn't get anything useful. We'll need to talk to Jason, he said. See if their stories match. You think she approached him on purpose? There are a lot of girls like her, Daniel said quietly. Beautiful, calculated, careful. He didn't need to say more. I knew exactly what he meant, and somehow that made the knots in my stomach tighten. I started thinking about the kind of heroines you find in romance novels. They're usually pure-hearted kind, unwilling to lie or scheme their way through life. Maybe Daniel was just overthinking everything. He poured a glass of milk and set it in front of me without a word. "Drink. You need the energy." Always so hard to like when he acts like this, caring in the most annoying, overbearing way. After breakfast, Daniel disappeared into his home office. I assumed he was calling Jason, but I wouldn't be surprised if he rang up Nathan too. I didn't ask. His face was grim when he came out, and I knew better than to poke. But later that night, when we were getting ready for bed, he brought it up himself. Jason admitted it. He did chase her first, but Grace told him she was never really happy in the relationship. Said it was exhausting being with someone so childish. They fought constantly, breakups, makeups, a 3-year loop. I didn't even flinch. The first time I met Jason with his wild red hair and the social skills of a broken toaster, I could tell he wasn't exactly boyfriend material. And Nathan, I asked. He ran into her by chance. His car broke down, forgot his phone. She passed by, lent hers. Out of courtesy, he took her to dinner. Just a thank you. I nodded. That sounded like the Grace I remembered from my fragmented memories. Helpful, practical, no hidden motives. She was good at brushing aside personal grudges. She was clearly more competent than I'd ever been. No wonder she attracted attention. Her love life might be a mess, but that wasn't entirely her fault. I mean, how could she help it if every man around her fell for her, even Daniel? The way he changed his tone when talking about her. Once the misunderstanding cleared up, his expression softened noticeably. I saw the spark, that tiny glimmer of interest, the quiet beginning of something dangerous. Compared to someone like Jason, a woman like Grace would naturally pair better with mature men, Nathan, or even Daniel. If I weren't holding the legal title of Mrs. Carter, maybe she'd already be standing in my place. Nathan might have the pedigree, the connections, the reputation, but the man couldn't make anyone feel at ease. He was cold even when he smiled. Rumor had it that when he visited Grace's parents back in her hometown, he was so stiff and formal that her folks wanted nothing to do with him. I sighed aloud almost without meaning to. Daniel glanced up from across the table. "What's with the sigh?" he asked, concerned. I just realized. "No one really has it easy, do they?" I said softly. "I got married because of family pressure. You married me to secure a business deal. Grace didn't ask for all this attention, but she's caught in the storm anyway. And me? Well, I'm the only one who actually dies in the end." Daniel didn't say a word. He peeled another boiled egg and gently placed it on my plate. So that was that. The misunderstanding was cleared. Grace had earned her shot at the interview, and according to Lily, she nailed it. She'd moved on to the second round. Only 2 rounds total. And guess who was leading the final one, Daniel? The story of the heroine and the misunderstood man was about to begin right before my eyes. I lounged on the hanging chair on the balcony, letting the afternoon breeze drift over my face. Everything was moving along just as it should. I had no intention of stopping it. Why would I? I didn't love Daniel. I wasn't interested in Nathan. I certainly didn't care about Jason. And as for any other men that might show up 4th, 5th, 6th in line, I hadn't even met them. Daniel could hand me the divorce papers right now, and I'd sign them without blinking. I might even negotiate for a slightly higher alimony payout just for sport. He wasn't stingy. My monthly allowance ran 6 figures, and he occasionally bought me luxury gifts just to keep things romantic. Without love, there were no arguments, no jealousy, no expectations. It was clean, comfortable. But trouble, as always, has a way of finding those who aren't looking for it. I wasn't the type to lose my temper easily. I rarely got mad, and no one around me ever gave me a reason to. Except Jason. He was the type who didn't understand boundaries if they punched him in the face. I was living the life of a pampered, well-fed, beautifully dressed socialite. That day I'd dressed to meet my group of plastic girlfriends for high tea. Everything was in place: outfit, hair, makeup. I looked the part, felt the part, until chaos knocked on the door again. The moment I opened the door, there he was, Jason Carter, standing tall and sullen, surrounded by a messy pile of cigarette butts at his feet. I didn't even try to hide my annoyance. 22 years old and still acting like a brat with no manners. He didn't like me, and frankly, the feeling was mutual. We'd been glaring at each other for 3 years now, ever since I married into the Carter family. Jason had always kept his distance, only showing up when he absolutely had to. and when he did, it was usually with a scowl that made my blood pressure rise. Today was no different. Without a word, he flicked a half-burnt cigarette to the ground and crushed it under his heel. "Where's my brother?" he snapped. "He's not home," I said curtly. "I know he's not. I'm asking where he went. How would I know he's not a fugitive? I don't track his every move." That clearly lit a fuse. Jason punched the wall just behind me, the echo ringing through the entryway. Of course, nothing happened to the door. It was reinforced and burglar-proof, like everything else in this overpriced apartment. But Jason's knuckles. Not so lucky. A scrape or two bloomed across his hand. God, this guy. If anyone needed to be dragged into a police station, it was him. I shoved him lightly. All 6 feet 2 of him didn't budge. I shoved again. This time he took 2 reluctant steps back. "What the hell is wrong with you? If you've got issues, go deal with them. Don't bring that mess here." Jason must have realized he'd gone too far. His next words came out quieter. "My brother didn't come home last night, did he?" "Nope." "Why?" "You know where he went." "Where else?" I shrugged. "He's probably out building his little fairy tale with Grace." The moment I said her name, Jason's face twitched like I'd just jabbed a knife through his pride. It hit me then how pathetic he really was. The breakup had happened years ago, and here he was still moping, still clinging to the wreckage. In our world, when rich boys like him wanted something, they usually got it. Women circled him like moths to flame, and if he wanted a specific type, all he had to do was snap his fingers. But Grace had tangled herself with not one but 2 of his older brothers. This wasn't just messy, it was humiliating. Jason wasn't like me. I could be content with a big bank account and a peaceful life. He was raised spoiled, used to getting whatever he wanted without effort. For someone like him, love and heartbreak were rare, exotic things, mysterious and maddening. I placed a hand on his shoulder and said gently, "You need to let go. The longer you hold on, the more it'll hurt." He looked at me like I'd grown horns. You know everything, don't you?" I smirked. "Not just everything. I could probably predict how this whole love triangle ends." His expression turned into one of disbelief. "You're not even a little upset." "Upset? Why would I be?" I gave a casual shrug. "Ever heard of a strategic marriage? That's what this is. You used to think I wasn't good enough for Daniel, but here we are. 2 powerful families joined through one tidy legal contract. I became Mrs. Carter, and in return, both of us reaped the benefits. Love, please. That's for people who can afford to waste time." Jason was quiet for a while. Then he asked, "Does Daniel know that's how you feel?" I sighed. He was surprisingly easy to read for someone born into wealth. Some things don't need to be said out loud. They're understood. "So, you have someone else?" "Not yet," I said with a smirk. "But I've never lacked options." His jaw clenched. I didn't blame him. I was young, beautiful, wealthy. If I walked into any exclusive club, men would line up to offer me a drink, and probably more than that. Hell, some of them would pay just to breathe the same air. Jason clearly hadn't seen this side of me before, and the shock was written all over his face. "You were born into this world too," I said calmly. "Surely you've noticed how things really work. This is nothing new. Just because it's common doesn't mean it's right, but it is what it is." He didn't respond. "If you're serious about being with Grace, ask yourself, do you think your parents would ever approve?" "Or your grandfather?" I asked. Jason dropped his gaze to the floor. "Your brothers have spent years building something. Nathan's worked hard for almost a decade, becoming someone who could carry the family name. Daniel gave up his personal life for the company and made every deal count. And you? What have you done? What do you have to offer besides a short temper and a high-maintenance attitude?" Jason flinched like I'd slapped him. "Don't be naive." I continued, my voice calm but firm. "Nathan's ruthless. Daniel might smile all the time, but underneath he's calculating as hell. If you think you can go up against them in a fight over anything, especially Grace, you're overestimating yourself." The words hit their mark. Jason's bravado melted into embarrassment. He turned on his heel and marched toward the elevator, slamming the call button like a child denied dessert. I watched him in silence, amused. Right then, my phone buzzed. My friends were waiting, texting like impatient seagulls. I grabbed my purse, slung it over my shoulder, and started walking toward the elevator. Jason spun around, alarmed. "Don't follow me," I let out a laugh, a genuine, amused, couldn't hold it in kind of laugh. I gave him the same icy look he once gave me the first day we met when he judged me like I was some gold digger who'd tricked his brother into marriage. Relax. You think I'd waste my time following you? He didn't answer. The elevator doors opened and he stepped inside, defeated and quiet. I watched them close behind him with an amused smirk. Some people learned the hard way, and Jason Carter was about to get a masterclass. When the elevator arrived, I stepped in first. Jason Carter hesitated for a moment before slipping in behind me, positioning himself in the corner, putting as much space between us as possible. I didn't even bother to acknowledge him. Instead, I kept my eyes on my freshly manicured nails, admiring the shimmer under the light. As the elevator doors opened on the ground floor, the first thing I saw was my husband, the one who hadn't come home last night. His eyes found mine first, then flicked to Jason. His expression instantly turned cold. I already have plans, I said flatly, and stepped out. But Daniel Carter caught my arm. His gaze, however, remained locked on his younger brother. What did you say to your sister-in-law? Jason stepped out too, and the arrogance he had carried earlier vanished. Still, his voice was tight with anger. So you can sneak around, but nobody's allowed to talk about it. That bratty tone, classic Jason. Daniel didn't raise his voice, but it was obvious he wasn't in a good mood. I told you it was a misunderstanding. If you don't believe me, ask her yourself. You might not trust me, but surely you'd believe her. After all, you're in love with her, aren't you? Jason clenched his fists and took a deep breath. I saw it with my own eyes. They were hugging, laughing, getting cozy real fast. She's only been working at the company for a few months, and they're already like that. Now that was something. I paused suddenly, much more intrigued than I had been about my brunch plans. Compared to gossiping with plastic friends, this scene was a lot more entertaining. Daniel turned to me. Do you believe what he said? What could I even say? We were only married on paper. Whether I believed him or not shouldn't even matter. Jason scoffed. I saw it with my own eyes, and I already explained, but you refused to listen, Daniel replied, his voice dropping colder. If seeing is believing, then what am I supposed to think now that I see you two coming down together in the elevator? Should I assume you're sleeping with your sister-in-law? He let the silence hang for a beat, then added, but I won't, because I know she's not the kind of woman who'd go for someone like you. Whatever nerve he hit, it shattered Jason. His eyes welled up, and he spun around and stormed off without another word. You're not going after him? I asked. Daniel shook his head. Let him cool off. He'll be fine. Who were you meeting? He asked, shifting his attention back to me. Just some girlfriends. One of them's back from overseas, so we're catching up. Can't reschedule. His voice was careful, like he had more he wanted to say. I shook my head. No, I'm not one to break a promise. Daniel gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes and took my hand. Then I'll drive you. We were quiet the entire ride. I didn't ask anything, and he didn't offer anything. Just before I reached for the door handle, he grabbed my hand again. Grace, do you trust me? His voice was soft, genuine, and I couldn't bring myself to say what I really felt, that I didn't care, so I nodded. Of course. You've never given me a reason not to. Not before, not now. But as soon as the words left my mouth, I wondered why he looked so serious. I scratched my head and said, Daniel, you do remember we only got married for business, right? I must have touched a nerve. He stared at me for a long, long moment. 3 minutes passed, maybe more, and he said nothing. I waited, growing uncomfortable, but he just kept looking at me like something inside him had collapsed. The whole day he'd seemed off, but now it felt like he had sunk even deeper. Still, he didn't lash out. Daniel Carter wasn't the kind of man to lose his cool, not with someone like Jason, and certainly not with me. When he stayed silent, I unbuckled and stepped out. The car door shut with a solid thud behind me, but I paused to glance back through the slightly open window. Daniel was still staring at me. His eyes were a storm of sadness, disbelief, and something close to betrayal. I couldn't read him fully, but I knew that look. It was the kind of look men gave when they wanted to keep everything, even when it made no sense. He had feelings for someone else, that was obvious, but he still wanted to keep me here, wearing the label of perfect wife, playing house like nothing had changed. Daniel Carter always knew how to maximize his benefits. Right now wasn't the time for divorce. Our families had just announced $1 billion joint project. A split at this moment would be disastrous for business, for reputation, for everything. Daniel wasn't the type to burn everything down for love, not like Jason. To him, career would always come first. On the surface, it looked like I had spent 3 years living a pampered life as a trophy wife. But I wasn't some airhead with no worries, no thoughts, no pain. I just stopped showing it. Even the role of a trophy wife came with its own circle, a world where relationships were currency and every interaction held potential. In gatherings where it wouldn't be appropriate for men to attend it, was the wives who stepped in as the face of the family. Many business deals didn't start over boardroom tables, but over afternoon tea, where words slipped casually between women carried 10 times the weight. And I had played my part in that game more than once, bringing Daniel Carter potential partnerships he might never have accessed otherwise. The Carter family, of course, carried themselves with pride and reserve. Whenever I hosted an event, I was treated like royalty. People gravitated toward me without my having to lift a finger. But I never slacked off. I knew when to speak, when to smile, and when to listen. At this stage, I was still the most suitable wife Daniel could have. He might have started feeling intrigued by Grace Taylor, but it hadn't reached the point where he couldn't live without her. Grace, by background, wasn't someone who could easily adapt to the social world we operated in. It would take her months, maybe years, to learn the art of small talk that sounded sweet, but carried intent to master the graceful charm required in high society circles. Daniel's reluctance to let me go made sense. Once I pieced everything together, the unease inside me calmed. I reassured him internally, at least for now, our goals were aligned. He had brought me into some lucrative investment projects, and the returns hadn't even started rolling in yet. Why would I cause conflict? Besides, divorcing in our world wasn't some casual matter. Our elders alone were an obstacle course. Then there was the asset division, which could drag on for months. At best, we were looking at a 3 to 5 month legal slog. Daniel's expression was growing darker by the second, his eyebrows so tight they could crush a fly. I waved goodbye and started walking away. Emily Brooks, he called from behind. It was the first time since our wedding he had called me by my full name. Normally it was Honey or just Emily. My body stopped on instinct. His voice cracked. "Is your heart made of stone?" When I turned around, he was already in the car engine roaring to life as he sped off. What did that even mean? Was he actually hurt because I hadn't screamed or cried like some jealous housewife? Please? If most men in our world heard their wife say things like that, they'd laugh in their sleep. But Daniel Carter, he was built different. Men like him, young and rising in their industries, always had temptation nipping at their heels. Even business dinners came with a side of flirtation. Half the time you didn't know if they were closing deals or opening hotel doors. Last night, for instance, he didn't come home, just sent a text saying he had to work late. And this morning Jason had shown up on my doorstep, face full of outrage, like he'd been cheated on himself, all but pointing a finger at me, demanding I keep Daniel on a tighter leash. If they weren't brothers, Jason might have thrown a punch at Daniel already with that temper of his. After tea with my friends, I caught a ride home, and what greeted me was chaos. Jason sat on the floor of the living room, a faint bruise forming at the corner of his mouth. Daniel sat on the couch, face like thunder, the laptop on the coffee table, playing back a surveillance clip from the front door, Jason throwing a full punch at it. Jason looked up when he heard the door, red-eyed and miserable. Then he glanced nervously at Daniel, stood up, and bowed low, like 90 degrees low. "I'm sorry, Emily. I was out of line. I shouldn't have raised my voice. I shouldn't have acted like that in front of you. I shouldn't have said those things." I kicked off my shoes and stepped inside, barely sparing him a glance. "Next time you lose your mind, don't drag me into it." Jason quickly moved to block my path up the stairs. I gave him a sharp look. He dropped his eyes to the floor. I spoke to Grace," he mumbled. "And I reviewed the office security footage." I crossed my arms, and the floor had just been mopped. She slipped. My brother caught her before she fell. That's it. Just helped her steady herself and let go. The whole thing lasted like 10 seconds. He darted over to the couch, grabbed a second laptop, and opened the video file, pushing it toward me like a peace offering. "Here, look. I'm not lying. You can see it clearly." He just helps her stand, then steps away. It's all there. What a coincidence. 10 seconds of footage, and somehow Jason happened to witness it firsthand. I must have worn every thought on my face, because Jason looked genuinely confused. He scratched the back of his head, embarrassed. I got too worked up. I barely glanced at them and jumped to conclusions. I overreacted and caused trouble for you and my brother. I raised an eyebrow. You really like her that much, huh? The second you saw her having lunch with your brother, you kissed her right there on the street. That wasn't even that long ago, and now here you are, again, making a scene. Jason's apology sounded much more sincere this time. I'm really sorry, Emily. You can hit me if you want, as long as it makes you feel better. That's not necessary, I replied coolly. I'm not a fan of violence. Wouldn't want to give you more evidence to take to the police, right? I moved to walk around him, but he followed, insisting that I finish watching the video footage. He wasn't lying. It really had been a harmless accident, just Grace slipping on a freshly cleaned floor and Daniel catching her before she hit the ground. The so-called hugging and laughing Jason swore he saw was just Grace thanking Daniel and him politely replying. I honestly couldn't tell if Jason had poor vision or if his imagination was just that wild. Either way, I was tempted to recommend a neurological exam. Daniel hadn't said a single word since I got home. He didn't even look at me. Maybe he was still upset. But I didn't think I said anything wrong. I had only told the truth. If that was too much for him to handle, how could he possibly navigate the battlefield of corporate politics? Jason looked increasingly worried. His face drooped, guilt practically dripping from his eyes. He tugged gently at my sleeve. Emily, please don't fight with my brother over this. It's all my fault. This boy was unbelievable. I told him clearly at the door earlier today, but it was like he didn't hear a word I said. Not only did he let Grace's words cloud his judgment, he was now telling me and Daniel, the business couple, with no real love between us, not to argue. I was too tired and sleepy to keep this up. I let out a tired hum and gently nudged him out of the way. He finally stepped aside like a chastised schoolboy. I'm going to sleep. You two can keep talking if you want, but if you're going to fight, take it outside. Don't trash the house. Jason nodded obediently. Daniel didn't even flinch. Daniel was the kind who didn't often get angry, but once he did, it took a long time for him to cool off. I wasn't going to coddle him. This time was a misunderstanding, sure. But what about next time? No matter how many times we cleared things up, the end of this marriage still felt inevitable. I didn't want to die a tragic death in some foreign country. Those memories, though they hadn't happened, were vivid enough to haunt me. I wasn't about to let them become real. In this life, aside from money, there was nothing and no one worth fighting over. Maybe someday Daniel would come to appreciate the kind of wife I had been: reasonable, capable, composed. He'd be lucky. As I walked upstairs, I caught Daniel looking at me. I forced a smile, one that screamed indifference. I couldn't see his expression clearly from that angle, and I was sure he couldn't see mine either. Not that it mattered. I turned and walked into my room without a second thought. Daniel had to get back to work. After disciplining Jason, he brought him back to the company. I napped for about an hour before waking up and ordering fries and grilled skewers. The house was empty. Both the housekeeper and the cook had moved out, and I was completely alone. I usually preferred it that way. Freedom, silence, no one breathing down my neck. Even when Daniel had been home, he never really tried to control me. But ever since the incident, he had grown more cautious, occasionally tossing out a reminder or two. They'd left the family laptop in the living room. With nothing else to do, I opened it up and started watching the surveillance footage saved on it. That's when I realized something. Daniel must have heard everything I said to Jason earlier. Oddly enough, the thought made me feel better. If he heard it, even better. Some things weren't easy to say face to face. If he could hear them and get the message, we could avoid future messes. Just then, my friend Chandra, one of the better connected ones, started bombarding me with messages. What's going on between the second young master and your husband? Did the brothers fight? She attached a couple of pictures. Check this out. That bruise on Jason's face. Did your husband do that? Oh my God, girl, I feel bad for you. Who is this woman anyway? She's got both Daniel and Jason wrapped around her finger. And now she's going after a married man too. Are we really that low on decent men these days? She's young, sure. But wow, she plays dirty. What's next? She going for all three Carter brothers. So now it was comedy hour, apparently. I sighed. What's so funny, really? Chandra should look in the mirror. She was cast in the same role as me, a villainess in someone else's story. Just wait until Grace and her so-called Prince Charming have their moment. I doubt she'll still be laughing then. Things unfolded even faster than I expected. Not long after Chandra texted me with the next twist, her dream guy had just added another girl on social media. The same man who usually took an hour to reply with a single emoji now checked his phone every minute like he was afraid he'd miss a message. I smirked bitterly. Poor Chandra. Even if Daniel hurts me emotionally, at least he still pays for everything. What does her heartthrob give her besides empty promises and vague excuses? Chandra, always trying to act breezy, wrote back. Please. I'd never fall for a guy that dumb. Let him go blind if he wants. I didn't buy her act. I knew she was hurting. Then she sent me a full high-resolution gallery. Look at this, she wrote. My new target. Fresh meat. Just entered the industry. Looking for a sponsor. Affordable too. Hey. I flipped through the photos. Young, good-looking, maybe even charming if you squinted past the posing. How much per month, I asked, only half joking. She replied with a sticker of a hands-on-hips cartoon character. Not much. He's new, doesn't dare ask for too much. About 100 million per month. He's got friends too, all around the same price. Then she tried to rope me in. Want to join? I can hook you up. No thanks, I replied. I've got a husband, and mine is more than easy on the eyes. Chandra scoffed. You're living the dream. A business marriage, and you still managed to snag Daniel Carter. Then she sighed. My parents are still pestering me to get married. It's exhausting. She switched gears. By the way, what really happened between your husband and Jason? They fought over some poor girl. I didn't want to air dirty laundry, especially not to someone as nosy as Chandra. So I made something up. Jason was being disrespectful. Daniel just taught him a lesson in manners. Chandra teased, half joking, keep lying. You're married. You don't know what it's like. Having a husband who really loves you, that's the dream. I'm screenshotting that, she threatened playfully. If Daniel ever cheats, I'm posting it everywhere. I shrugged. Go ahead. If he cheats, I'll be walking out with a fortune. Then I'll use the money to spoil young guys left and right. You'll be green with envy. We might be different, Chandra and I, but we shared one thing in common, our love for money. At that, she went quiet, then swore solemnly. If I ever get rich, I won't forget you. Daniel, perhaps trying to imitate his older brother, spent the next 7 nights sleeping at the office. He didn't call, didn't text, not even a word. Like he was digging in his heels, refusing to budge. Fine by me. I carried on with my life alone at home. When he was home, I hated how he clung to me in bed. But now when he wasn't there, I found it hard to sleep without someone holding me. Humans really are impossible to please. At another afternoon tea, Chandra brought her new boyfriend. He looked worse in real life. Airbrushed photos had done wonders, but he had a decent personality and made her laugh until she nearly cried. As we were saying goodbye, Chandra sneakily slipped a card into my bag. Open it when you get home, she whispered, with a wink. She loved her little games. I didn't feel like arguing, so I nodded. When I got home, the first thing I noticed were Daniel's shoes by the door. So he was finally back. I wondered how far things had progressed between him and Grace in the past week. Jason had posted on his WeChat that he'd been working overtime every day lately, totally out of character. He must have been working overtime trying to win Grace's favor. With Nathan out of town on a business trip, Daniel had the perfect opening. Maybe something was brewing. Maybe he'd finally thought about what I said. Maybe he realized that I was the ideal partner, generous, cooperative. Maybe he wanted to fix things. But probably not. 99% sure that wasn't the case. Back in the master bedroom, I went into the closet to put away my bag. The stitching must have been loose because it fell and everything spilled across the floor. The card Chandra had slipped me slid out, skidding across the polished floor until it stopped right at the bathroom door. Right then, the bathroom opened. Daniel stepped out shirtless, wearing only gray sweatpants, a towel draped casually around his neck. He bent down to pick up the card. The second he looked at it, his face darkened like a thundercloud. My heart dropped. Emily Brooks, he said flatly. His voice was ice. His eyes locked onto mine. I rushed over and snatched it from his hand. Damn it. It wasn't a card, it was a suggestive photo of a shirtless man complete with name number and a handwritten message that said, Ms. Brooks, been admiring you for a long time. Hoping to hear from you soon. Chandra, you evil witch. She set me up. Fury welled up in me. My knuckles cracked as I clenched my fists. Daniel crossed his arms and leaned against the doorframe. Not going to explain. That's not mine, I snapped. I have no interest in that kind of thing. He raised an eyebrow. So what you're saying, if you ever do decide to sleep around, you'll give me a heads up first. I picked up the photo and threw it back on the floor. If I ever did anything like that, I'd have the decency to be upfront about it. Unlike some people, I wouldn't pretend everything's fine while sneaking around. If you think it's necessary, I'll cooperate, I said flatly. But I honestly don't have that kind of urge. One Daniel Carter is more than enough for me. That didn't sit well with Daniel. I could tell he wasn't happy, and for once he wasn't trying to hide it. He's usually good at masking his true feelings in 3 years of marriage, no matter what storms he faced outside. He always came home calm and collected. So if he was letting his displeasure show, now it meant he wanted me to see it. That realization made me nervous. I quickly shifted my tone. How could you think I'd go looking for someone else? Do I seem like that kind of woman to you? How could you think so lowly of your own wife? Daniel stared at me in silence for a few seconds. He didn't argue, just pointed to the picture on the floor. Where did this come from? A friend gave it to me. Which friend? I shook my head. Why does it matter? He didn't answer that. Instead, he asked, where did you go today afternoon tea? With friends. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Chandra, I instinctively shook my head. No, someone you don't know. He went quiet again, then asked, were there men there? Some of them brought their boyfriends, I replied. Boyfriends, he repeated with mock amusement. As in, the kind who get a monthly allowance. I kicked the photo aside, annoyed. Oh, please. In our world, this kind of thing is everywhere. Why split hairs? That guy, what's his name, Devin? Was he one of them? No, I said firmly. Devin wasn't there. The guy who showed up was one of his teammates. I looked Daniel in the eye. And for the record, I'm not into that type. His photos were heavily edited. In person, he didn't look like much. Daniel zeroed in on what he thought was important. So if he looked good in person, would you have been into him 7 days apart? And my husband was suddenly in the mood to twist every word I said. I let out a sigh, walked over, and wrapped my arm around his. When did you get home? Have you eaten? He didn't resist when I pulled him toward the office next door. You probably still have work to do, right? Might as well finish it now so you won't be up late. I'll order food. What do you want? Anything's fine. Okay, I'll pick. I'm going to take a shower now. When the food gets here, just grab it for me. Okay? I turned to walk away but noticed he was trailing behind me like a moody kid. I gently pushed him back. Stay here. I'll tell them to leave the food at the door. I'll grab it after I shower. I want to shower too, he said. You haven't yet. No, I was about to, but I heard noise and came out. Okay, then use the guest bathroom. But realizing he was still sulking, I softened my tone. Fine, you use the master bath. I'll take the guest one. Daniel shook his head. Let's shower together. I blinked. What? He repeated together. And just like that, he tricked me. By the time he carried me out of the shower, I clearly saw his work clothes in the laundry basket. He'd changed already before hearing a noise. But I let it go. People say couples fight at the head of the bed and make up at the foot. Daniel's mood had improved dramatically. He nuzzled into me heavy and insistent, pressing his entire weight down like he wanted to merge into me. I tried pushing him off. No luck. He bit lightly at my neck. Don't move. Let me hold you a bit longer. You've been holding me forever. Not long enough. He tightened his arms, murmuring against my skin. A whole week without holding you. I couldn't sleep. I laughed. And before we got married, how did you sleep then? He inhaled deeply, as if breathing in the scent of my hair could calm him. His whole body seemed to melt. This man. Could it be that he actually liked me? The thought startled me. My heart skipped. I slowly pulled my hand from his waist, but he caught it. He almost never acted like this. Hold me, he whispered. Emily, I want you to hold me. So I let my hand rest back on his body. No, this couldn't be. Could it? Did Daniel Carter? Like me, I remembered that time in the car. How serious he looked when he said he'd never do anything to hurt me. The frustration in his voice when he accused me of having a heart made of stone. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. But if he liked me, what did that mean for the story? The male lead belongs to the female lead. So does the second male lead. And the third. And the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. Every man is hers. That's the rule. How could one of them ever truly fall for someone like me? I'm the wicked supporting character. Daniel must be glitched. Or maybe I'm the one with the issue. So many questions swirled in my head. Then I heard his low voice right beside my ear. Babe, it's been a week. Did you miss me at all? The way he whined, it caught me off guard. It felt foreign, yet oddly familiar. Things had only just started getting better between us. I didn't want to mess it up again. Of course I did, I said. How much? A lot. Couldn't sleep at night. It was torture, you jerk. Daniel chuckled softly. You looked pretty cheerful to me. Where you weren't home. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. It was miserable. Why didn't you text me? Daniel asked. You were busy, he scoffed coldly. Liar. Then he sighed and murmured, Grace, you can't keep doing this. You know, he leaned his head against the curve of my shoulder. His breath, warm and steady, tickled my skin in a way that made my heart skip. You can't treat me like this, he whispered. I'm human too. I get hurt, I feel things. Sometimes, I just wish you'd reach out first. Show me that you love me even just a little. My pulse was racing, my face flushed. A part of me still thought it was ridiculous to talk about love in a marriage built on business. But another part of me couldn't stop the fluttering in my chest. Truth be told, Daniel Carter checked every box I ever wanted in a partner. If we had started out like a normal couple, if this were some regular love story, we'd probably be one of those annoyingly happy marriages by now. Daniel shifted, propped himself up, and looked down at me with such intensity I thought he was going to kiss me. But instead he ran his fingers through my hair, his face suddenly serious. Come with me to the hospital tomorrow, he said. Get your brain checked. What? I stared at him. Daniel, are you serious right now? Is this really the time to say something like that? I pushed him off, scowling. I'm warning you, if you call me crazy one more time, I'm not speaking to you again. And do you even realize how little sense that made? He rolled onto his back with a sigh and pulled me into his arms. I've been thinking about this for days. You've been different. Ever since that injury. Yeah, well, anyone would be different if they suddenly had memories of the future in their head. I didn't argue. I just sighed and said, You're right. Something weird did happen. Let me ask you this. Do you believe people can see the future? He didn't reply. Didn't matter. I kept going. You probably won't believe me, but we're living in a novel. He blinked. I didn't stop. Your brother Nathan is the male lead. That girl, Emily, she's the female lead. You're the second male lead. Jason barely scrapes in as third. And me, I'm the evil supporting character. Daniel still said nothing, but I caught him subtly reaching for my forehead like he was checking for a fever. I slapped his hand down. I'm serious. According to the plot, Emily breaks up with Jason, then develops a vague romantic tension with you. But because you're married, she refuses to act on it. So Nathan swoops in and wins her heart. Wait, Daniel interrupted finally. You're saying this whole thing's a book, yup? And how do you know this? I just do. I saw it all after the accident. And trust me, I didn't even know who Emily Brooks was before that. He went quiet again. Then to my surprise, he said, Keep going. In the end, Emily ends up with Nathan. You and Jason both back off supporting her from the shadows. And then some other men come into her life, too smart, rich, handsome. And guess what? They all fall for her. But Emily, being the morally pure saint she is, chooses to stay loyal to Nathan. Daniel raised an eyebrow. And what happens to you in this story? I sighed. I die. He pulled me closer, arms tightening protectively. A pretty tragic death, too. I sniffed. In the story, I fall for Nathan, but he despises me. So I turn to Jason, but he's even crueler. He humiliates me, tries to have me arrested even though I've never broken any laws. When I finally decide to just come home and live peacefully with you, you throw divorce papers in my face. No matter how much I beg, you don't budge. Daniel didn't say a word, just gently rubbed my back. We divorce. My parents find out and disown me. They freeze my accounts, cut me off entirely. Everyone in high society mocks me. I can't stay in New York anymore. I pack up whatever designer bags and jewelry I have left and move to some small town. But before I can even find a place to live, everything I have gets stolen. I go to the police, but there are no cameras nearby, no suspects. They tell me to wait for updates, but none ever come. Daniel was completely still, his breathing deep and even. I kept going, voice shaking now. I last about 2 weeks there. Then, I starve. I die alone in a rental apartment. My voice cracked. I slammed my fist into the mattress. And when I die, I'm holding a half-eaten scallion pancake I picked up from a trash bin. I never even liked scallion pancakes. Honestly, I'd rather starve than eat one. So why the hell was I clutching it like it was my last treasure on earth? Maybe I was just that stubborn, even at the end. Daniel couldn't help it, he laughed. So what happened next? Nothing, I said simply. I was dead. Everything after that had nothing to do with me. Still, I told him everything I remembered from the dream or whatever it was. How word of my death traveled back to New York. How everyone said I deserved it. How nobody even bothered to come to my funeral. My family just hired some random guy to take care of the arrangements. He pocketed the money and dumped my ashes somewhere cheap. When I finished, Daniel leaned down and kissed my forehead. He stroked my cheek, eyes full of something close to sorrow. That's a hell of a dream, Grace, he said softly. I know it sounds insane, I admitted. If I hadn't lived it, I wouldn't believe it either. But I don't want to die young, Daniel. I'm 23. I still want to enjoy my life. That's why I'm going to stay away from you and from everyone else, I added, trying to sound stronger than I felt. If you ever want a divorce, just say the word. I won't fight it. No. Daniel's voice turned firm. He took my face in both hands and stared into my eyes. Grace Taylor, I don't care what you've forgotten, but you will remember this. When we got married, we promised to stick together no matter what. I won't divorce you, and I don't want to hear that word again. Not from you, not even in a joke. I blinked at him. That's a big promise. He gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. The corners of his eyes were red. I'm sorry, he whispered. You don't need to apologize, I replied instantly. It's not your fault. I should have noticed something was wrong, he said. I should have taken better care of you. It wasn't you. I was the one who wasn't paying attention. He kissed me then, not urgently, but gently, like he was trying to anchor me to this world. Don't worry. Tomorrow we'll go to the hospital and get a full checkup. We'll figure this out. And we did. Daniel didn't take me to the same hospital as before. This one was smaller, more private. After a long battery of tests, the doctor, an older man with silver glasses and a calm voice, came in and gave us the results. Mild memory disorder, he said. Likely caused by a concussion. It's rare but not unheard of. He explained that trauma like mine could cause memory loss sometimes, just a few days, sometimes big chunks of someone's life. In your wife's case, he said, there appears to be some confusion between reality and fiction. Daniel exchanged a glance with me, then hesitated. She's been telling me things about this whole life she remembers, like it came from a novel. Could it be related? The doctor nodded. That's entirely possible. Has she read anything recently that sounds similar to what she's describing? We both looked at each other. Had I been reading something like that, I don't remember, I said honestly. I might have. I don't work, so I read a lot when I'm bored. The doctor was incredibly patient. He and Daniel combed through my reading history, checking every novel I'd ever opened on my tablet. Most of them had dramatic, over-the-top titles, the kind that usually turn me off. But I'd still click on them sometimes, just to check out the first few chapters. Finally, after nearly an hour, they found one when the wallflower became everyone's obsession. Just hearing Daniel and the doctor read the title out loud made me want to crawl into a hole. But as they skimmed through the chapters, I began to remember things. The writing style, the dramatic setups. It all felt weirdly familiar. I liked that author's voice, simple, smooth, but I couldn't recall the details. Then they hit chapter 33. That's when the evil supporting character named Grace Taylor showed up. Well, the doctor said, sitting back in his chair. That explains quite a bit. He pointed out that I'd read up to chapter 97, the exact chapter where Grace dies, and that it coincided with the day of my accident. After waking up, it's likely she began to blend elements from the story into her real life, he said gently. But it felt real, I protested. Too real. In the memory, the female lead was named Emily Brooks. She looked exactly like my brother-in-law's ex. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You didn't know her before? No, I said. I never met her. Not until Jason showed me her resume after I got hurt. The doctor considered this. It's possible you saw or heard about her in passing, and your brain filled in the blanks. Are you sure you saw her face clearly before seeing the resume? I hesitated. Honestly, I don't know anymore. It's all so blurry now. The doctor turned back to Daniel. In this story, does the female lead interact with all three brothers, apparently? Daniel said. Then it's not surprising, the doctor concluded. It's a classic setup. 3 wealthy brothers, 1 perfect heroine. And our patient here just happened to become emotionally involved with the character who shared her name. It's just a coincidence, I argued. Sure, it kind of matches your family's dynamic, but that doesn't explain everything. I have a friend and her dream guy also has some weird connection to Emily Brooks. She's never even met him in real life, and still her story mirrors mine in a creepy way. The doctor leaned forward. What exactly did your friend say? She said her guy recently started talking to Emily, like really getting close, chatting all the time. Did your friend mention Emily's name specifically? The doctor pressed. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my messages with Truong Loan. As expected, she never once mentioned the name Emily Brooks. Maybe she doesn't know that's her name, I offered. The doctor nodded and suggested I just ask her to confirm. Daniel added Loan knows what Emily looks like. She even sent Grace pictures of her with Jason. If the guy she's into is getting close to Emily, he said Loan wouldn't describe her vaguely. She'd definitely use something more specific. That made sense. I messaged Loan asking if she had a picture of the girl who was currently flirting with her crush. As always, she replied almost instantly, clearly invested in the situation, and sent me dozens of photos taken from the most ridiculous angles. One thing was clear, the woman in those photos was not Emily Brooks. I blinked. My brain felt like it had been yanked out from under me. Daniel and the doctor kept talking about potential treatments, but like a cliché straight from a TV medical drama, the doctor gave us the same grim non-answer. No one could predict when or if my memory would return to normal. Could be tomorrow, could be never, he said. There's no proven treatment. Sometimes it resolves on its own, sometimes it doesn't. What we recommend is talking to her often about past events. Take her to familiar places, stimulate the memory. I raised a hand. Doctor, not only had I never met Emily Brooks before the accident, I had never even heard of her. Are you sure the heroine in the novel isn't named Emily? Nope, he replied, shaking his head. Her name is Vanessa May. She likes mooncakes. Lotus seed paste specifically. Seriously, I didn't know what else to say. It was just too much. That afternoon, a heavy summer rain swept across New York. By the time we left the hospital, the clouds had cleared and a double rainbow stretched across the sky. Daniel's mood brightened just like the skyline. Following the doctor's advice, he took me to a little restaurant we used to go to, a place we apparently loved. You remember this place? He asked as we sat down. I raised an eyebrow. Daniel. I'm memory impaired, not memory-less. He laughed, the kind of laugh that softened everything in his face. Okay, smartass. Do you remember where we had our first date? I squinted. Wasn't it here? His smile dropped. Wait, that wasn't it. Are you serious right now? He asked. You don't remember, I'm not joking. His voice got lower. Grace, this isn't funny. Crap. I really didn't remember. All right, I said. Tell me, he crossed his arms. It was your brother's birthday party. 5 years ago, don't you remember? I nodded slowly. I remember the party. You were there. He looked at me like I'd just told him the moon was made of cheese. How else would we have met? Your brother invited me. I sucked in a breath. You mean we've known each other for 5 years? He relaxed a little. We only met once. I asked your brother to introduce us, but he said you'd just turned 18 and weren't interested in dating. So you just saw me. I talked to you, he said, his voice gentle but firm. You don't remember I talked to a lot of people that night, I admitted. Daniel exhaled sharply and gave up arguing. Do you not remember anything about how we even got together? I remember. That we dated, I tried. He was quiet. Then, as if something clicked, he said, Wait. Do you even remember that our first date was arranged by my sister-in-law's brother? What his eyes narrowed. You don't remember what you said about arranged marriages that night? I blinked. I thought this whole thing between us was, well, about business. An alliance between families. Wasn't it? Daniel stared at me like he was seeing someone he didn't know. You really think that's all it was? He began telling me everything, how we met, how we started dating the day he proposed our wedding, even all the sweet little moments afterward. And yet, nothing resonated, nothing felt like mine. 3 months of living with this identity of being that woman, the evil side character, and it had completely wiped out the real Grace Taylor inside me. Back then, my feelings for Daniel Carter were nothing more than admiration from a distance. I always kept myself in a safe zone, ready to step back at any moment. He recalled every moment of our relationship, how we met, how we fell in love, the sweet days of our marriage. To him, it all felt vivid and alive. To me, it was like hearing someone else's story. And that was strange because Daniel was exactly the type of man I always imagined myself with. Our relationship had grown fast, but we weren't moving at the same pace. Sometimes when he looked at me and said nothing, I could feel the disappointment in his eyes, like he was waiting for a version of me that wasn't here anymore. One afternoon, while borrowing his phone to check something, I accidentally saw his recent browser history. Searches like how to treat memory loss, can amnesia be reversed, disorientation after head trauma. Does hypnosis help restore memories? He'd consulted multiple doctors, but none had clear answers, according to our assistant Lisa. When I was resting in my room, Daniel would sometimes meet with a private physician in his office for over an hour. He wasn't just worried, he was desperate. In front of me, though, he never showed it. He always acted like the perfect husband, calm, composed. Lately, he'd been working late more than usual, and we hadn't had a proper conversation in weeks. So today I visited him at his office. He was happy to see me, but didn't take me on his usual tour around the company during his lunch break. Back in his office, I handed him a paper, my list of familiar places we were supposed to visit for memory stimulation. He glanced at it. "You already feel like it's useless, don't you?" he said as he held the paper. "It's not that I don't want to go," I explained. "It's just, this isn't normal amnesia. My memories aren't gone, they're just scrambled. Visiting old places doesn't seem to help." Daniel crumpled the list and tossed it into the trash. "All right, no more trips." "That's not what I meant," I paused. Then added, "I finished the novel, by the way. I can tell fiction from reality now." He smiled weakly. "That's my smart girl. I mean it. Even if this thing never completely goes away, it's fine. I can still function. You don't have to push yourself so hard. You've got enough on your plate." His smile faded. "I don't want you to be sick. I'm not sick. If your brain isn't fully recovered, then to me that's still sick." He tapped his thigh gently and gestured for me to come sit. He always did that when he needed comfort. I quietly climbed onto his lap, rested my head against his chest, and stroked his back like he always did for me when I was upset. "Daniel," I whispered, "I really do love you. Please stop worrying so much." He pressed his face into my neck. "You used to say you love me all the time. I still do. I even kissed you first, remember?" I leaned in and gave him a quick peck on the lips. "See, I'm still me." He didn't smile. "Then why did you say our marriage was just for convenience?" "That was because of the head trauma. I didn't mean it." "You also said you wanted a divorce. I won't say that again. We'll stay together no matter what. I can't imagine being with anyone else." He chuckled a little bitterly. "Funny. Weren't your girlfriends always trying to set you up with other guys? I'd never marry any of them." "Oh, but if the right one came along, you'd consider it?" He was pouting now, clearly jealous. "You even brought home that half-naked guy's picture, Grace." "Seriously," I gasped. That was Lone's fault. If I'd known what it was, I wouldn't have accepted it. And besides, he was wearing shorts. He wasn't naked, Daniel scoffed. Still, he looked older than he should have. "He's probably younger than us," I shrugged. "He's in entertainment. They usually debut in their early 20s, so now I'm old." He hugged me tighter, pulling my waist into his. "I'm 25. "That's not old. Of course not," I laughed. Running my fingers through his hair. Mimicking his tone, I added, "But if there's something wrong with your brain, you should definitely get it checked out. Don't be stubborn about it." Daniel laughed, pulling me into his arms and leaning back halfway onto the chair, completely relaxed. "I watched the footage," he said, voice low, but amused. "The one where you talked to my younger brother. You remember when you came home and saw me watching it? I must have replayed it a dozen times." He chuckled, but there was a shadow behind the sound. "Back then, I didn't know it was because of the head trauma. I thought, for more than 3 years, you'd been putting on an act. The way you talked to him, so serious, so convincing, it made me believe it." "So you really believed it?" I asked softly. He nodded. Half believed, half doubted. "My head was a mess, and you didn't offer any explanation. You came home, didn't say a word to me, like you were silently confirming everything. The hospital didn't catch anything. They did all those tests and still couldn't figure out what was wrong. Maybe my condition was too strange, too rare. Even the doctors couldn't see anything unusual in the scans. During that week at the office, Daniel barely slept. Nathan, his older brother, started staying with him just to make sure he didn't collapse. Eventually, Daniel broke down and told him everything. Nathan, being calmer, realized something was off and insisted he take me to another hospital. So it turns out I owe some of this to my brother-in-law. Daniel gave me a mock glare. And you, while I was at home losing my mind, were out having fun and bringing home half-naked pictures of some random dude. That wasn't intentional, I cried, laughing through my words. Lone gave me that card right before I left, and I completely forgot it was in my purse. If my bag hadn't fallen open, who knows how long it would have stayed there. I was furious. Daniel muttered, so mad I didn't even want to talk to you. But I came over, didn't I? I teased, nudging him. Asked if you'd eaten, tried to cheer you up. He couldn't help but grin. You did, and I forgave you immediately. I'm too easy, aren't I? No, I whispered, you just love me too much. Daniel wasn't the kind to express affection with words. He preferred actions, subtle gestures, quiet moments. Flowery phrases weren't his thing. He rarely showed jealousy or pouted unless he was truly anxious, like now. I held him tighter, sighing inwardly. I really had no excuse. It was our anniversary, and I couldn't even manage the shoes. They were too tall, too tight, and I still wore them anyway. Worse, I wasn't watching my step. 1 second he warned me, and the next I was tumbling down the stairs right in front of him. He must have been scared out of his mind. Of course, no one blamed me. I'd been injured. But the real tragedy, I'd been reading a ridiculous online novel just before the ceremony. And wouldn't you know it, the author had named the evil side character Grace Taylor. Same full name. What were the odds? My name isn't exactly common, you know. We both sat in silence for a long time. Daniel looked exhausted lately. His eyes were closed arms around me as he tried to rest in the chair. I thought I should let him nap, so I slowly began to get up. He jolted awake, grabbing my wrist. Where are you going? I thought you should rest in the other room. There's still half an hour before my meeting. Stay with me. I already slept until 9 this morning, I said with a smile. I glanced at the dark circles under his eyes and sighed. How could I say no to him? What do you do when your husband loves you this much? He eventually went into the meeting and told me to wait in his office. After work, he'd take me out for dinner. While I waited, bored out of my mind, Lone messaged me. We started chatting, and of course, I told her everything. She responded with a string of ellipses. My dog is lying here on the bed. Stop feeding it all this lovey-dovey garbage. Then, so you really lost your memory? More like memory disorder, I replied. I've lost pieces, but not everything. Lone. You're unbelievable. What was so special about those shoes anyway? You knew they were impossible to walk in and still wore them. Never again, I promised. Honestly, they're not even that cute anymore. Cute. They nearly killed you. A few moments later, Lone sent a long message. Honestly, I get why Daniel's been like this. You passed out instantly. No matter how many times we called your name, you didn't move. His family's estate is way out in the suburbs, so the ambulance took forever. And none of us dared move you ourselves. I've known Daniel for years, and he's always been the composed, confident type. That night was the first time I saw him completely lose it. She paused, then added, he cried, Grace. Just kept saying your name over and over again. You looked dead. I swear if anything had happened to you, he would have followed you without a second thought. I never realized that Lone had actually been at the scene that day. Hearing how clearly she recalled everything, I started to feel that maybe she understood more about the relationship between Daniel and me than I had given her credit for. Back then, when I said Daniel and I were just husband and wife in name, only why didn't you stop me, I asked. Lone snapped, clearly frustrated. Because when you're in the mood, you'll say anything. You even shoved that little card into my hand right in front of him. How was I supposed to know what was going on in that head of yours? That wasn't the first time I asked. Stunned. You're saying I've done this before? My heart sank. Daniel said we loved each other deeply. Why would I have done something so careless? Lone groaned and sent a voice message instead. Girl, don't act like you don't know. You've always had high market value. Do you know how many young stars out there would die for a chance to marry someone like you? All those men we've met, once they get introduced to you, they're quick to pass your name around their little circles. We agreed you'd just take their info and pretend nothing ever happened. It's no big deal. They make an offer we politely decline. That's it. I had no idea your brain was scrambled like an egg. Then I brought up something else. What about when you gossiped to me about Daniel and Lillian? You said she was going after married men. That was just gossip. Come on, everyone in our circle was saying that, but I didn't take it seriously. I was just joking with you. Her voice lightened a bit, but the message still hit hard. That's what plastic sisterhood looks like, I thought. Still, there was truth in her words. But you love him, she said. You can see it. And he clearly loves you. That's rare in our world. When you find real love, you should hold on to it. Make it right. His birthday's next month, right? Don't forget. Her reminder made me pause. After a moment, the exact date came back to me. Thank God, I sighed with relief. I hadn't picked a gift yet, though. Daniel and I were both practical people. Every year on his birthday, he would give me expensive gifts, ones that appreciated in value, while I would give him gold. He never complained. I figured he liked it just fine, but this year felt different. I wanted to give him something special, something that would genuinely make him happy. The only problem was I realized I didn't actually know what he truly wanted. Daniel was always the kind of man who placed business first. He thrived on victories in the corporate world. I stayed at home most of the time, and sure, my marriage to him had helped enhance his image and career, but I had very little knowledge about the business itself. Any deals between our families had been handled by my father and brother. I barely knew a thing. I thought maybe I could give him a project, something symbolic, but that wasn't realistic. I only knew the basics of investing, and even those investments had been guided by Daniel. Giving him cash felt awkward and crass. Besides, I still relied on his monthly allowance. That evening, Daniel came home from work on time and took me to a restaurant near his office. Noticing how quiet I was, he asked with concern, "Are you feeling okay?" I bit my lip, deciding not to overthink it anymore. "What do you want for your birthday?" I asked bluntly. He didn't even flinch. By now, he was used to my awkwardness. "It's still early," he replied casually. "It's only a month away," I pointed out. "Every year I go to the bank and buy gold the day before. I remember," he said, smirking. "This year I want to get you something better. I want to give you something special," I insisted. "Gold's great, but..." "It's hard to beat gold," he interrupted. "It holds value. It's practical." I narrowed my eyes. "You're so shallow. Can't you think about anything besides money?" He gave me a look that said everything. "You're the one who's obsessed with money. You wouldn't even consider something that doesn't increase in value." Was he calling me shallow? Maybe he had a point. I'd never known lack, never gone hungry or cold. But somewhere along the way, I started measuring everything in dollars and cents. The waiter brought our steak, and Daniel carefully sliced it into bite-sized pieces for me, then passed them across the table. Out of nowhere, he said, "There is one thing I really want." My eyes lit up. "Tell me. I'll tell you when we get home." That was cryptic. He better not be playing games. The moment we stepped into the house, I turned to him expectantly. Instead, he walked straight to his study and locked the door behind him. I sat outside waiting no more than 5 minutes before he returned, holding a sheet of A4 paper. When he was younger, Daniel had studied calligraphy, and the results were nothing short of remarkable. Even with just a few lines, his handwriting carried such strength and grace that it felt like each stroke held a purpose beyond words. "Sign here," he said, handing me the paper. I lifted it to read. Black ink on white paper, bold and clear. 1. Daniel Carter promises he will never divorce Grace Taylor. 2. Daniel Carter promises he will never betray Grace Taylor. 3. Daniel Carter promises he will never leave Grace Taylor. His signature was already there, bold and unmistakable. Of course, anyone with a poetic soul would know how to cleverly shift all responsibility to himself. I looked at him and said, "You know, this has no legal value, right?" He nodded and handed me a fountain pen. "I trust you're not the kind of person who breaks promises." That's what he had said to calm Jason the day he nearly lost it. I wasn't sure if Daniel meant it as a joke, or if he was trying to hint at something deeper. Either way, it was what he wanted, so I signed it happily. Daniel looked like he'd just received something more precious than gold. He carefully placed the paper into the safe. I stood beside him laughing. "You're acting like a teenager in love." He met my gaze with quiet composure and said, "So you still think nothing's more valuable than gold?" I rolled my eyes. "It's just a piece of paper." He feigned shock. You're comparing my heartfelt promise to a worthless piece of paper. I didn't argue further. As long as he was happy, that was enough. On his birthday, I still went out and bought 10 gold bars, placing them neatly on his desk. But it was clear that the paper meant more to him than any material gift. After that, he stopped obsessing over finding new treatments for my memory disorder. He no longer insisted on taking me back to places we'd visited in the past. And when I realized he wasn't just a fictional second lead with a broken heart, I genuinely opened up to him. We started building something real. It felt natural, almost inevitable, because we were the kind of people who fit effortlessly into each other's lives. Right before Lunar New Year, we scheduled routine health checkups. As a married woman with a delayed cycle of over 10 days, the doctor urged me to do a pregnancy test first. I'd gone through the process before, so I wasn't too concerned. But this time, the results surprised both of us. I was pregnant. After 3 years of hoping we were finally expecting. Daniel claimed it didn't matter to him whether we had children or not, but I could see the joy all over his face. That very afternoon, word of our pregnancy spread to family and friends. The baby was still too small to show, but we were glowing. Lily, who had returned to our old home for a few months, was reassigned back here. She didn't have experience caring for expectant mothers, so her main role was to keep an eye on the new housekeeper and keep me company. Jason and Emily came by with a basket of nourishing food. Jason, freshly shaven and looking more mature than ever, didn't seem bothered by the fact that Daniel had punched him months ago. He casually asked how I was doing and then made his way into Daniel's study to talk. Lily and Emily stayed with me in the living room. Lily mentioned that things between Jason and Emily had settled down and that another cousin of Daniel's, Nathan, also had some good news. The Carter family had nothing but blessings these days. Emily had heard about my memory issues, but hadn't had the right moment to ask. Now that we were face to face, she couldn't hold back. I told her everything, and she and Lily laughed until they couldn't breathe. "That's wild," Emily said, wiping her eyes. "The evil side character in your novel has the same name as me, and the heroine's favorite food is lotus seed mooncakes. That's not even the best part," I added. "The heroine starts off entangled in drama with 3 brothers from a wealthy family. She's the ex-girlfriend of the youngest, and the villain, also named Emily, ends up marrying the middle one." Emily laughed so hard she had to catch her breath. "So that's why you told Jason to stop chasing you. You thought the story would end like the novel." I scratched my nose, embarrassed. "I just figured the villain shouldn't get in anyone's way." That day, he looked like he was about to cry. I felt bad. The 2 brothers came out of the study just in time to hear the tail end of our conversation. Jason no longer held any resentment toward me. He even joked as he sat beside Emily. "That day you tore me apart so bad, I started to doubt if I was good at anything." He sighed. "I'd been at the company for a year, and just when I thought I was doing okay, you tore me down." I did say some harsh things that day. "Sorry about that," I mumbled. Daniel was beside me, gently massaging my arm. "Don't apologize," Jason said cheerfully. "I deserved it. I really did. I was a total mess back then. You were right to call me out." His humility was almost disarming. I turned to Emily. "So you insisted on working at Carter Enterprises just because of this fool?" She blushed and nodded. "I was doing fine at my old job. But after our breakup, my sister told me Jason completely fell apart, smoking, drinking, all of it. I've never met someone who treated me the way he did. I couldn't just let him spiral." Jason grinned proudly, his chin high in the air. "See, she still loves me." I shook my head, still amazed. "I had this dream where you'd just graduated. Then I read the novel, and the heroine was still in school." Jason thought for a moment. "Maybe you saw Emily's graduation photos on social media. Back then she was under a lot of pressure, so I'd post encouraging comments every day. Young people really do have the most unexpected ways of showing affection. I wasn't trying to be dramatic, but I couldn't help myself. Unlike us, Daniel, my brother, and me, we never made a show of love." Jason glanced over at his older brother and muttered, "He's just afraid of losing you. That's why he tries to hide you away." And how could I expect him to express his feelings so naturally? That just wasn't in his nature. I wasn't the type to wear my heart on my sleeve either. After seeing our guests out, Daniel gently helped me back to the downstairs bedroom. Once bitten, twice shy, or as they say, if you're bitten by a snake, you'll fear even the rope for the next 10 years. Ever since I got pregnant, Daniel had rearranged the guest room on the first floor, just so I wouldn't have to climb the stairs anymore. I appreciated the caution, one wrong step, and it wouldn't just be a concussion this time. Because of the baby, I had to be extra careful. But Daniel was taking it to another level. Even walking a few steps, he insisted on holding me. He helped me lie down, tucked the blanket around my feet, pulled a chair close to the bed, and settled beside me as if he intended to stay until I fell asleep. "Relax, babe. You're too tense." I smiled at him. Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm not tense. I just want to take good care of you." I turned to face him, my eyes soft. "Do you really love me that much?" He brushed the hair from my forehead and smiled. "Do you want to hear my answer?" "Not really," I whispered. "It's just, I don't get it." "What exactly made you fall for me? Was it love at first sight or something?" He paused for a beat, then said playfully, "You're young, rich, beautiful, and classy. Honestly, if you hired an escort, they'd probably pay you just to hang out." That sounded oddly familiar. It was the same line I'd thrown at Jason not long ago. I gave him a look. "Really, you're quoting me now?" "Men are so petty," Daniel just laughed, reached for the remote, and adjusted the thermostat. I eventually dozed off and woke up naturally around 4:30 in the afternoon. He wasn't in the room anymore, probably working in his study. I was surprised he didn't wake me up. Sleeping so much during the day always left me restless at night. I picked up my phone and noticed all my alarms had been disabled. Lily, who was supervising the housekeeper in the living room, noticed me walking out and hurried over. "Ma'am, Mr. Carter received an urgent message and had to return to the office for a meeting." "I see," I said. "He asked the chef to prepare chestnut congee, your favorite. Would you like to have it now or later? I just woke up." "I'm not hungry yet. Let's wait." "Yes, ma'am." "Do you need anything else?" I shook my head. "No, thank you. Everyone can go about their work. I'll be in the study looking for something to read." I didn't touch web novels anymore. They gave me lingering trauma. Instead, I'd started flipping through Daniel's collection of serious literature to try to nourish my soul a little. Once inside the study, a spontaneous curiosity took over. I wondered how much wealth Daniel had accumulated over the years. He'd always said his assets were ours, no separation between what was his and what was mine. He never hid the safe's code from me either, so I opened it. The first thing I saw wasn't jewelry or cash, but that silly marriage pledge we'd signed, the one written like it came from a teenage love letter. I reached for it, but another paper slipped out from underneath. The older sheet was already yellowed with age, written in childish cursive ink. It said, "Grace Taylor promises that when she grows up, she will definitely marry Daniel Carter." The handwriting was undeniably mine. I'd practiced calligraphy in school. It wasn't award-winning, but it was neat and recognizable. I must have written that when I was a child, so we really did make a promise like that. When we were young, I had absolutely no memory of it. Of course, Daniel the businessman would think ahead and secure a future bride early. I didn't know whether to laugh or be creeped out. I snapped a photo and sent it to him. He must have been in the meeting. It took him half an hour to respond. But when he did, he didn't seem embarrassed at all. In fact, he scolded me. "I figured you'd only find that while going through my belongings after I died. This is your private safe. If you didn't want me to see it, you wouldn't have put it somewhere so obvious," I replied. He answered, "I figured you wouldn't remember anyway." No surprise there. Not to be outdone, I fired back. I was a kid, okay? How old was I supposed to be then? Daniel didn't miss a beat. I remember everything clearly. Of course he did. That man could win an argument in his sleep. "We've known each other since we were kids, haven't we?" "I don't know. You tell me. If I remembered, I wouldn't be asking you." He didn't reply right away. He was probably swamped with work, and I decided to let it go. That evening, Daniel came home for dinner. Halfway through the meal, I couldn't resist asking again. He gave me a long, wounded look like a husband wrongfully accused. I stood up, walked to the bedroom, and returned with a few medical papers. "Mr. Carter," I said, half joking, "do you remember your wife suffered a concussion and has memory complications? It's not my fault if I don't remember things. Maybe I do remember, just not yet." His face practically said, "As if I believe you?" I blinked innocently, playing it cool. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. I'm not that curious anyway." He didn't fall for it, just quietly focused on his meal. But the more he stayed silent, the more I wanted to know. Maybe the look in my eyes finally softened his heart, because much later that night, after the lights were off and we were lying in bed, Daniel finally began to speak. His grandparents, he said, used to live in Annville before they emigrated. They were neighbors with the Taylor family. As a kid, Daniel often visited them with his parents. There weren't many children around, and my older brother, who was 5 years older than me, didn't want me tagging along with him and his friends. So I was left to play by myself. We met at the playground a few times, Daniel said quietly in the dark. You noticed I was around and started coming over every day, dragging me into that little game you love, the let's pretend to be a family thing. So I was the clingy one, I murmured. Well, I was only 2 years older than you. At that age, everyone's into those silly role-play games. You're saying you weren't into it? Nope. Never liked it. I rolled my eyes. I couldn't imagine Daniel's stoic, composed Daniel pretending to be a husband in some sandbox marriage. You told me 3 times, by the way, that you really, really, really liked me and would marry me when you grew up. 3 times I must have been seriously shameless. That marriage contract, the one you signed recently. You wrote the original one, too. Apparently, I couldn't even write at the time, so Daniel had taught me how tracing letters together in the sand. So you tricked me into writing it, I teased. Not at all. I told you marriage was too early for kids, but you threw a tantrum, cried, until you were breathless and clung to my legs so I couldn't leave. Liar. I was a refined little girl. I never threw tantrums. Daniel sighed dramatically in the dark. Grace Taylor, bold enough to do it, but too cowardly to admit it. You're not going to provoke me like that. I'm immune now. I'm just stating facts, he said with a shrug. You really think I haven't felt anything for you over these months, I asked. I find it hard to believe that you haven't wanted to steal me away at least once. I mean, come on. Wouldn't it be better than getting a divorce? I sighed. Love isn't worth more than my life. Oh, so now you care about your life. At that party when I told you to watch your step, you didn't listen. Please don't remind me. I regret it deeply. He pulled me gently into his arms. No more getting hurt, okay, dummy? I stroked his cheek. Don't think about it anymore. I'm okay now. You call this okay, he said softly. You forget things. You space out. This isn't healthy. I took his hand and placed it over my belly. Well, now I'm a healthy, expecting mother. That's something, right? Pregnancy isn't easy. You know that. That's why I think. After this one, let's stop here, okay? You only want one. Yeah, one's enough. I want to raise them well. Fine with me, he said. I'll take care of the birth control. No pills for you. Good, I said with a grin. I wasn't planning to take any. His warm hand gently caressed my belly. I won't let you put anything harmful in your body. That was one of the things I admired most about Daniel. He always put my well-being first. Some men only think about themselves and never consider the toll it takes on a woman. I lifted my head and kissed his chin. He gave a soft laugh and leaned in. This time our lips met. The scent of mint lingered on him. He didn't smoke or drink, just a clean, familiar fragrance of shampoo and soap. After a moment, he pulled away. No more kissing, he said gently. Get some rest. I understood immediately. I slipped out of his arms and back onto my side of the bed. These days we didn't dare cuddle too close, worried about putting pressure on my stomach. After a while, he got up. I'm gonna shower upstairs. There's a bathroom here. I don't want to wake you. I'm not even sleepy yet. He paused, then smiled and stayed. Before going into the ensuite bathroom, he switched on the bedside lamp. He didn't want me browsing on my phone in the dark. After his shower, he returned to bed carrying the light scent of soap and water. He lay beside me, careful to keep a bit of distance, and turned on his side to face me. Do you know why I asked you to sign that promise? He asked. If you tell me now, I won't be able to sleep, I replied. But I was curious. Why? You remember that little marriage note you wrote me when you were a kid? His voice held a soft, teasing lilt. You promised to marry me, and now you're Mrs. Carter. So if you promised once not to leave and promise again now, I believe you'll never break it. You're just as childish as Jason, I teased. He took my hand and held it with both of his. His warmth seeped into my skin and made my heart flutter. I blushed and instinctively looked away. Daniel chuckled. We've been married for years, and you still get shy. It's only been 3 years, I said, pouting. But you've liked me for much longer, haven't you? I saw you again when you turned 18 at your brother's birthday party. That was 5 years ago. That's not that long. 5 years is long enough. I shifted closer, looked at him seriously. Well then, I whispered. Let's have many more 5 years together. He blinked, then smiled slowly, resting his forehead against mine. Those web novels you used to read weren't a total waste. You're getting really good at the sweet talk. Did I say anything wrong? Not at all. Then stop talking and just enjoy it. Daniel laughed softly, unable to help himself, and pulled me into his arms again. Remember what you said, he murmured. Many more 5 years. I rested my hand on his chest. Don't worry, I whispered. I always keep my promises.